Welcome to Black Belt Leader. This is our 40th episode of the show. And today we're going to be talking about busy. We're going to be talking about how we can break the back of being constantly busy, despite at times feeling like the world is just coming at us. So before we talk to a couple of our guests who can help us with some strategies to get on top of life and work, let's have a look at a few facts around busyness to start with. So according to research, 2/3 of employees feel overworked and overwhelmed. 50% of employees work more than 40 hours a week. 79% of businesses report having staff engagement problems due to busyness and stressed employees. So clearly, there's lots of numbers there that we need to shift to help us to be clearly not just busy, but in fact busy doing the right things and ultimately productive. So our first guest joining us is Dermot Crowley. Dermot is an expert on productivity. His business is Adapt Productivity and is the recent author of the book Urgent. Welcome to the show, Dermot.
Thanks so much, Karen. Great to be here.
So I just want to start by unpacking one of the things you talk about in your book is overcoming an urgent culture. What do you mean by that?
So I've been working in the productivity space for going on 20 years now. And so I work in a lot of large corporate organizations. And what I've found is in most cases, there are urgent reactive cultures where urgency is everywhere. Everything is urgent. Everything's needed now. Everything was needed yesterday. And it's kind of become the norm. It's just the way people experience work and it normalizes the urgency for them. So I guess I see a lot of people who become victims of that culture and they think that there's nothing they can do about it. That's just the way it is around here. And I truly believe that, number one, there's so much that they can do about it. And number two, if they don't do something about it, it leads to a huge amount of stress and overwhelm. And ultimately, we end up getting distracted, being very busy, as you say, but unfortunately not busy doing the work that truly has impact in our roles.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's very consistent with what I observed, but also what I've experienced. You know, at earlier stages of running my own business, I was such a slave to that external demand that I have no doubt that it led to the burnout that I experienced, you know, getting to a point where my mind and my body just wasn't keeping up with that pace. So, you know, again, for the people who are, as you pointed out, feeling like there's nothing they can do about it, what's your advice?
So I think the first thing to do is to understand how urgency is created and the different types of urgency. So there are some things that are truly urgent and it's reasonable that they're urgent. There's nothing we could have done to anticipate it or to plan for it. And we need to be able to respond to that stuff in a reasonable way. But a lot of urgency is below the line. It's unproductive and it's either what I call fake urgency. So it's things that seem urgent, but they're not actually urgent. And either somebody else is making it urgent or we make it urgent ourselves unnecessarily. Or you've got the avoidable urgency. And they're things that are urgent, but they shouldn't have been urgent in the first place. They've only become urgent because somebody has left it until the last minute. Or even worse, we've left it until the last minute. So I think that's the first thing, understand what's happening and then work out some strategy to try and eradicate the unproductive urgency. And that puts you in a better position to deal with the true urgency when it comes along.
Yeah. So if I'm dealing with a boss that feels like everything is urgent and they want everything yesterday, you know, what's some of the conversations I can be having with them? How can I start to influence up to change part of my world?
So I guess the first thing to do is to test the urgency. So sometimes it's not real. Sometimes bosses just have a work style where they throw things out there and they pile one priority on top of another priority. But when you actually have a conversation with them about it, they kind of go, oh, actually, that's not as urgent as you think it is, or leave that till next week. So open up a conversation, first of all. And I believe that bosses need to open up the space for that conversation to happen. That's a part of the cultural shift that needs to happen. But the other thing you can do is learn to negotiate. So sometimes you can negotiate around the urgency itself. So you can push back in the deadline and have a reasonable grown-up conversation about the fact that I've got a lot of things that I need to get done by next week. This is just one of them. Can you help me here? But sometimes it's not the deadline that you negotiate on, it's other aspects of the work. So there's a very old adage that goes, you can have it cheap, you can have it fast, you can have it good. Pick two of them.
Yeah.
So you can't have
Yeah.
all three. And I kind of taken that idea in the book, and I talk about the 6 urgency dials. Time is one of the dials that we can increase or decrease. Quality would be another dial that we could increase or decrease, so that we can use that as a negotiation tool. So if you said to me that I needed to have a report in by Tuesday next week, and that's a very short time frame, I could say, okay, look, I can deliver that by Tuesday, but it's not going to be 100% quality. Would 80% be okay? So we can learn to negotiate around that stuff, and we've got the scope of the work, we've got the resources, we've got budget. They're all things that we could use to negotiate. And I reckon that this is one of the things that gives people some feeling of role in their work. It's not just one thing on top of the other with no room for discussion. It's actually adults trying to get work done as best they can.
Yeah. So what happens if it's, ourselves, that's the biggest problem, it's us that's generating this busyness in our lives? What's your advice for the professionals to, get again a bit more control in their world?
Yeah, look, I see this play out a lot where we actually make things more urgent than they need to be, and we don't realize we're doing it. Email is a classic example where people have email alerts turned on, and every time an email comes in, they get a bing, 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 and they're always looking at their phone. And what they're doing there is they're dialing up the urgency unnecessarily. So turn off your email alerts is one thing you can do. Try and limit yourself when it comes to the phone, especially at home, outside of hours. Don't be looking at your email all the time. Set up a routine around your email. But probably the number one thing you can do as an individual is to create a proactive system for managing your work and your activities. My experience is most people use a calendar to manage their meetings, and we're all very used to scheduling meetings for the appropriate date and time. But when it comes to managing our priorities, most people use their inbox as a to-do list, or they write out a paper to-do list, but they don't actually manage their time around stuff, and that leads to a more reactive way of working than is necessary. So I use tools like Microsoft Outlook or Gmail, which a lot of people would use. I actually use the task management system in those tools, and I schedule priorities ahead of time. So I've got things scheduled for today, but I've got other things scheduled for tomorrow, and I've got things scheduled for Friday, loosely in a task list for those days. So I'm proactively managing when I'm going to do things. And I just simply try to make sure that I'm scheduling the work before it's actually hitting its deadline. I'm proactively scheduling it.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I love that. And it's something I can certainly personally relate to. I think my world dramatically changed when I actually got out of my own way and allowed my team to do some of that prioritization for me as well. So there are certain blocks in my diary where it says you're going to be working on that project, and then having the discipline to actually do that when that time frame comes up, because there's lots of shiny objects in my world that I'd rather at times play with rather than getting on with the task at hand. So I certainly know, again, that when we elevate that focus on productivity and then support one another, it can make a very big difference. So, again, when we're talking about, breaking some of these habits that we've got, what would be your number one tip? If we really want to break the back of busy, what's the primary thing we need to make sure we're doing?
Number one tip would be to make time and protect time for planning. It's not any more complicated than that. I see people who are involved in all sorts of planning. We do organizational planning, we do project planning, we do team planning. But the missing piece in the puzzle is most people don't protect time for personal planning. They don't actually start their day by putting a plan in place for the day. They don't finish their week by planning next week effectively. And the reason they don't do it is because we're all so busy, we don't have time to stop and plan. But it's a false economy. You just end up in working more reactively and working on the wrong stuff too much of the time than if you actually put some discipline around your planning routines.
Yeah, Totally agree. Love it. Thank you. So before we move on to our weekly WTF at Work segment, which we're going to ask you about, how can our viewers find your new book, or in fact your previous two books?
Yeah, fantastic. So all three books are there's urgent there. All three books are on the normal platforms, so online, Amazon and Booktopia, Dimmicks, all the big bookstores will have it, or you can go to the Wiley website, or indeed go to my own website, which is at productivity.com.au, and you'll find them there.
Excellent. Really appreciate your wisdom on all of that, and obviously encourage people to get online and check those out. So now we're going to turn to our weekly WTF at Work segment. Let's have a look at what we're dealing with today. So this week's WTF, my boss is too busy to actually talk to me. Am I expecting too much from my manager? And given that he's so busy, should I just suck it up and learn to forever find my own answers? WTF.
WTF. Wow.
That.
Oh, this is so topical for me at the moment, because I'm actually working with some very senior executives who are on the other side of that question. And their frustration is, I'm not getting the time to spend with my people that I know I should be getting, because I'm so busy in Zoom meetings and dealing with email and dealing with urgent issues. So I think what you'll probably find is, if you are frustrated and you're not getting time with your boss, the chances are they're frustrated as well. And if you raised it with them, they would kind of go, I know, we need to do something a little bit different. One strategy that a senior exec I worked with put in place that worked really well, because he was never available to his team because he was in meetings all day long. So what he decided to do was to advertise 3 hours in the week. And there were different hours every week, but his executive assistant would send an email out to his entire team to say, John is going to be available between this time and this time on these 3 days. And this is pre-COVID. He would go and sit in a meeting room, and the directive for his team was, you can come and talk to me about anything during those 3 hours. Just come and knock on the door and I'll drop what I'm doing and we'll have a chat. And now he does it via Zoom, or phone call. He just says, look, you can call me and I will be available during those 3 hours. And suddenly he became the most accessible senior manager in the organization. His team loved it. And he actually got a lot of work done, and it was as productive for him as it was for his team.
Yeah. And that, again, that's my experience, right? When we actually stop and we engage in the conversations we need to have, and people feel that we are accessible and they've, again, got the guidance or insights that they need to be productive, it can actually speed up our whole world. You know, the whole concept of slowing down in order to be able to speed up. So how common is it that these leaders are just, some leaders are just not talking to their people, in your experience?
Oh, look, I think every leader that I would talk to would agree that they should spend more time. Now, lots of them are spending a lot of time already, but they kind of see that as one of their main things. They should be leveraging other people to get the work done. And that means they need to be mentoring, and they need to be guiding, and they need to be coaching. So I reckon there's never enough time to do that.
Yeah, totally agree. Again, my view is a leader's job is to create outcomes through the talent and energy of other human beings. And if you're not even talking to them, WTF, that's not going to work.
That's right.
Dermot, really grateful for your contribution to Black Belt Leader today, and good luck with your book. I'm sure it'll be very popular.
Thanks so much, Karen. Loved it.
Take a short break, and when we're back, we're going to be joined by Julie Hyde, who's the author of Busy, to continue on this topic.
Stream us live on the Ticker app, Apple TV, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and tickertv.com.au. Ticker, streaming news now.
Welcome back to Black Belt Leader, where we're talking about how you can break the back of being busy. We're joined now by Julie Hyde, who's the author of the book Busy. Julie, welcome back to Black Belt Leader.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having me.
So let's get straight into it in terms of your observation of busyness. You know, what are some of the things that you observe causing people to constantly feel like the world's just coming at them and they're too busy to cope and nothing they can do about it?
Yeah, well, especially at the moment, people are feeling like the world is coming at them because we're experiencing such rapid change, and also that, this pandemic is causing us to have to move really quickly. So people are in a very reactive space at the moment, and that can cause a real sense of overwhelm and also frustration for people. So it's really about trying to circumvent, I suppose, that busyness for people, and really understanding that they need to create a sense of calm to be able to make sense of what's going on.
Yeah. So what are some of the practical tips you give people? You know, what are some of the strategies for creating that space, that calm, to be able to think, let alone do?
Yeah. So I suppose it is about creating that time to just, whether that's just 5 minutes or 10 minutes every day, to just stop and think and reflect on, okay, so what is going on here? Am I doing things that are purposeful and meaningful, or am I just simply in a reactive space and just doing things because they're coming at me? And the second thing is to be really clear on your priorities, which is something I think we've got a little bit better at in terms of managing and understanding that. But, you know, clarity reduces the overwhelm and that feeling of being out of control. So it's really about understanding, okay, so what are the top 5 things that I should be doing, both personally and professionally, and checking in and making sure that I'm actually doing those. And the third thing is just to know you cannot do everything. And it's really a matter of simply taking off that Superwoman, Superman cape and understanding you cannot do everything all at once. And it's, back to checking in with those priorities. It's about understanding, okay, so what can I do? What can I delegate to my team? What can I delegate to those in the household as well, in terms of professional priorities? But making sure, again, that you set boundaries for, it might be work time, might be professional time, but setting those clear boundaries for yourself can help you to say the word no a lot easier, and you'll find it a lot more empowering as well.
Yeah, absolutely agree. You know, I think, again, one of the things I learned along my journey in being a business owner is even how to say no to clients. You know, I can think of one client in particular pops into my head who would ring me on a Friday night and say, oh, this is really urgent. I really, really need it by Monday morning. You know, you'll get it done for me, won't you? And the answer was typically, sure, I'll do that, and then sacrifice the whole weekend to deliver something that at times, I might add, wasn't actually always needed for Monday morning. So, I think having that confidence and that courage to say, well, I don't have the bandwidth, or we don't have the time now, or whatever the case may be. In my experience, I also observe some people wearing being busy as a bit of a badge of honour. What's your observations of that?
Yes, this is something that I speak about a lot and have identified within my 8 typical ways that busy plays out for us. And the badge of honour is a really interesting one, because people can attach a very high sense of significance through being busy, and they get a real sense of importance out of it. But I think it's really important for people to understand the perception that they create through being really busy and talking about it a lot. In a lot of my research and discussions with people, generally people find the badge of honour busy, those who are just constantly talking about it, to be quite annoying, to be perceived as unapproachable, and to not be all that busy at all, because what actually is busy, and busyness is relative to all of it. So are you actually busier than anybody else? So I think that's really important for leaders, and it goes back to your WTF moment, where leaders can be perceived as being unapproachable because they're constantly in meetings. So I think people need to be really careful about the perception that they're creating through constantly talking about busy for their team, but also for their clients.
Yeah. Look, totally agree. And often the conversation I'm having with leaders is, they'll say, oh, I'm so busy. My next question is, well, how productive have you been? And that's, again, often something they haven't necessarily stepped back and measured for themselves. So success has been measured because I've got a lot going on and I'm juggling multiple tasks and I'm in high demand, without necessarily focus on, well, what's the impact I'm having here. So how can I as a leader recognise if I'm just allowing busyness to be this reflection of success rather than actually being effective?
Yeah, I think it's very much about that level of self-awareness. And if you're using that busy word all the time, if this is how you're responding to conversations, people asking you how you are or how is work, and if it's just constantly busy, it's like, okay, I really need to take that badge of busy off, put it down, and understand, right, so what am I busy doing? Am I busy, again, doing the things that are purposeful and meaningful? Am I spending time with my team? Am I just simply being reactive? Because we need to understand that busy is a habit that we get into, rather than something that is fulfilling for us. So if I was thinking, okay, I'm just busy, just being busy, it's again about stopping and saying, okay, what do I need to be doing and what do I need to let go of? Because there's a lot of things that we do in our busyness that we really do not need to be doing. There's lots of things within our comfort zone that we're busy doing, rather than moving us forward and moving us towards our goals.
Totally agree. I had a hilarious example of this when I was waiting to get on an aeroplane. And me being me, I'm very curious about human nature, and I'm a massive people watcher. And as my daughter pointed out, I don't always know when I'm not invited into a conversation. And so I was standing in the queue to get on the plane, and two colleagues were standing there, and the conversation was going, how are you going? Oh, so busy, so busy. The other one's like, oh, me too, so busy. And then another person joined the group, and they're like, oh, how are you doing? And he's like, oh, so busy. And they're like, yeah, we're busy too. Literally 5 people joined this group, and each time someone joined, their greeting to the group was, oh, so busy. And again, I couldn't help myself. I just literally cracked up laughing. I said, you are one busy lot. And, in that moment, you could see the recognition for them. It's like, yeah, we were talking about that a lot. So, again, I'm with you on that. I would strongly encourage that people hear that when they're saying it. And it's not about being busy. It's about being impactful. It's about being effective. So, again, I was just going to ask you to, elaborate on that. If that's where I'm at, what's some of the daily routines? What's some of the strategies to get my act together and have great impact?
Yeah, because I think linking back to that conversation, wouldn't it have been better for you to hear about what these people actually did and how they're making a difference? And I think that's something for us to be really conscious of, instead of just using that blanket word busy, which is incredibly boring and same for everyone, means nothing. It's about really having conversations about, okay, so change it up. What are you doing? What are the projects that you're working on at the moment? What are some of the interesting work that you're doing? What are some techniques that you're using with your team? Like, what are the things that are really making a difference in your world, rather than just using this blanket busy? And you'll find that the engagement in your conversations is going to be heightened, and people are going to start understanding exactly what you do, because busy says nothing at all. So that's what I really encourage people to do. If that word busy comes out of their mouth, which now when I have conversations with people, they might go to say busy, but then they change it up to something else. It's like, yeah, I'm being really productive around, this project or that project, or I had this great win yesterday. So it's just being a lot more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Because again, I've seen so many clients, who I'm working with them and they're feeling like they're really working hard. They're really trying to be successful. But other stakeholders in the business are just observing this busyness. They're not actually seeing the results. They're seeing lots of plates being spun. They're seeing lots of juggling acts going on, but that's not necessarily impressing. It's not necessarily making them go, oh, yeah, valued team member, so actually to get to that place where people can see what is that contribution, what are the priorities, what impact are we having, I think really matters for our brand reputation. So before we let you go, I just want to ask you to share with our audience how people can get a copy of your book.
Yes, on my website, which is juliehyde.com.au, and that's Hyde with a Y, and that's the best place to get a copy of my book, which details techniques for you to stop being busy and be a whole lot more productive and relevant and influential as a leader.
Yeah. No doubt, again, based on my observations, a lot of people that can take some of those tips, so I can encourage people to look that up and have a read and see if we can get some sense of control back into our worlds. So, again, I'm going to take you very quickly back before I let you go finally to our WTF. You mentioned it before. What's your observation of the leader who's just too busy to talk to people?
Yeah, I agree with what Dermot's saying in that, leaders have a really hard job at the moment to be trying to keep the doors open and keep their people employed, as best as they possibly can. But it's at this time that their people really need their leaders, and they need that connection, not only on a professional level, but on a personal level, because this, work gives people purpose, and it really can make a difference in terms of the relationship that the leader is having. So I am really encouraging people to lock in times, and as you said before, to be really disciplined to those times with their team, so that their team know that they have a dedicated time coming up with their leader. It's valued. And they have access to them. So that's the biggest tip that I can give leaders now. As hard as it needs to be a priority.
No. Well, thank you so much, Julie. Really do appreciate you joining us today. That's all we've got for Black Belt. Thank you. It's all we've got for time today for Black Belt Leader. If you want to get in touch, you can do that at corporatedojo.com.
Stream us live on the Ticker app, Apple TV, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and tickertv.com.au. Ticker, streaming news now.